Yeah, kia ora koutou, ko Dr. C taku ingoa, and I realized I got bumped right to the end, so I'm standing between you and dinner and drinks, and I normally like having the last word, but I'm also really bummed that I'm not there, drinking and eating with you. So I hope to be able to leave this amazing session today with a couple of juicy questions for you guys to discuss over dinner. Yeah, so this is Mahi that is under the uh, uses technology collaboration program by the International Energy Agency. And big thanks to my collaborating partners and countries in Aotearoa, which is the Electricity Authority, and MB in Sweden and in Canada and the United States. So I want to admit first up that the title of our research task, which is how to reach energy users, has copped a lot of criticism, especially by us, because hard to reach is not great terminology, because the question is, are they actually hard to reach, or are we hard to reach and not doing enough to reach them? And the answer is usually on the second part. It's also important to ask ourselves who are the loudest voices in the energy system. And, I think we can all agree that is not usually those who are small consumers who are hard to reach. Uh, Energy injustice, which is what we're focusing on, is structural and systemic globally, but also here in Aotearoa. And we do need to recognize that before we start fixing our energy system, and, focus on the just part of the transition, not just the decarbonizing and clean part. I did a big report on unintended consequences, and the majority of them were both manageable, knowable, and avoidable. And so we need to do better, especially not operating so much in our silos, so that we can actually anticipate some of those unintended consequences and manage them better. One of those issues is that we, especially those people who usually provide the funding or design the programs and policies, have some quite biased assumptions about end users. They usually lump them all in as kind of like a relatively homogenous thing, but there is an extreme end user heterogeneity and complexity and very different barriers to engagement to when you're dealing with different end user segments, especially those in the hard to reach space. The biggest barrier, which we heard a few times today, is trust. And another big barrier, which we also heard a few times today, is that there is really low energy system literacy in this country and in general. So we created a really broad definition of hard to reach energy users because we didn't want to miss anyone, because unfortunately the immediate assumption is to jump to low income, that it's low income, but low income is not necessarily equating to hard to reach. There's actually a whole lot of groups that may not be in energy hardship or like high users, high income people or small businesses or commercial building operators that also fall under those hard to reach definitions. So we did a huge literature review of over 1,000 publications, and actually found to our shock that was probably at least two-thirds, if not three-quarters, of energy users globally that could be regarded as hard to reach. And so we broke them into different characteristics, and then our colleagues in Portugal took that on with actual Eurostat census data to try and actually see and quantify what the proportions would be, and they basically agreed with us that it is a really, really seriously big issue that should all put our pants on fire. Um, so hard to reach doesn't equate with energy hardship necessarily. There's a big Venn diagram overlap, but we had it mentioned a few times today, and I just want to very quickly go into the four main ways that are currently being used to measure energy poverty in the literature. So there's that 10% indicator, which is largely not used anymore because it's just not accurate reflection of the broader contexts and needs to keep households in well-being. So instead, most, especially in the UK, but a lot of other countries are now moving to the minimum income or low income, high cost standard. There are also consensual-based indicators that determine a household's energy poverty level depending on the thermal comfort levels. And then, of course, the issue that I'm particularly interested in, and that is only really started coming up in the literature more and more in the last 5 years, is hidden energy poverty indicators, which actually look at households' abnormally low energy consumption. So under self-restriction, under consuming, and that's where you're getting into the real nitty-gritty. So you can group them into like expenditure-based metrics, which are the most common ones, and also the ones that Ben used and WEC uses, and the consensual-based indicators, which are really important, but often regarded as more subjective. So the expenditure-based ones are often criticized because they're not actually necessarily reflecting the true context. And then the consensual-based ones are, they're based on more resource-intensive, qualitative, and thus more subjective and self-reported experiences. Now, MB, of course, probably all the MB definition, which kind of tries to take this scalar approach of there is energy well-being, which is like division, and then energy hardship is kind of on the opposite end. The real best practice is by looking at integrated multidimensional frameworks of energy poverty. Here is one example that looks at 6 indicators and 3 factors. MB actually has done a really good job in its energy hardship metrics, looking at 8, different factors and contexts that all inform it. But when it came to the reporting, unfortunately, they really only focused on 2 of them. And out of the 5 questions that they ask, 3 of them are largely kind of like the same, different sides of the same coin. So there is now a new MB Energy Hardship report coming out, hopefully next month, except it's unfortunate because it's based on really outdated data that's up to 29 months out of date. So the new census data is coming out early next year. And so this report will lag, unfortunately. Also, quite a few of us in the room and a lot of researchers have criticized the last 2023 energy hardship report from MB4 underrepresenting the actual numbers because it's at 110,000 households. But if we look at how much energy hardship there actually is, we think it's probably 4, if not 5 times as high as that and increasing. And then like Angela said, and like a lot of us agree, this is a lot more than just energy hardship. It's also about transport hardship. It's about food hardship. We've got 900,000 Kiwis in food insecurity. We've got almost 60,000 women who are homeless. We got, homelessness increasing. We got 27% of children in food insecurity. And so like we need to look at this as a more structural and systemic injustice issue. So what I'm trying to actually talk to you guys really about is and I don't have the field research yet to back this up, but I'm actually wondering, should we change how we prioritize energy hardship groups? Because those in that low income kind of scheme are not necessarily in energy hardship and they're not necessarily hard to reach. Especially if they're on community service cards, they usually already have access to the current programs. When you add more compounding and intersecting vulnerabilities, such as being renters or being carers or being single parents, whatever it is, then you're starting to get more and more into hardship and into also being harder to reach or more hidden. And the squeezed middle, who are also a really interesting and I think much increasing group struggling with cost of living expenses, but who do not want to see themselves as poor. And I agree, there is a real stigma around, calling anyone being in hardship or vulnerable or in poverty. But that psychological stigma and whakama really causes a lot of issues. And so they may need different sets of engagement and interventions than that other low priority and not low current intervention group. And then the group that I think should probably be the highest priority group are those that are or that have fallen off the cliff and are in the greatest hardship and also the most hidden for various reasons. And in order to help them, we really need to have much more resource intensive and much more targeted and tailored programs and policies. So those groups, I just I don't want to box them into stereotypes, but I do want to make sure that we understand that they have really, really unique needs and reasons why they would be in energy hardship and why they would remain hidden. And so understanding some of those factors and motivations is really important because most of the energy hardship indicators focus on extrinsic factors like poor housing quality, energy prices, low income, lack of financial capital. But the intrinsic factors around consumption habits, that underconsumption and self-restriction, health or special needs, cultural and social practices often get ignored, and they need that more resource-intensive qualitative investigation. The other thing that we're also often doing is,
Oh, no,
sorry.
sorry. See, you're up to 10 minutes. That's
Oh,
fine if you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want questions, but just noting the time.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm barreling through. Not much longer. So the other thing is that the motivations are kind of different as well, because for some groups, they choose to remain hidden because there is fear, there's distrust, there's whakama, there's guilt, there's stigma. But there is also that involuntary motivation, which really is on us because they're misrecognized, deprioritized, disrespected sometimes by energy decision makers who make those decisions of who gets funded and what programs target whom. And so we really need to do more research and ask ourselves more like why they're hidden and understand that there are different reasons for that, and that means they need different engagement strategies and different interventions. And here are just some of the examples, and all of them have different um, groups that really fall very clearly into them. So what we did is this started with research that the industry funded because the industry recognized when the government changed that they needed to step in and really start reaching out to especially frontline and community actors who could help them identify and engage those hidden energy users that their customer care staff can't get to. And from that, Ergens then took on and funded us to do a co-design mahi that actually looked at how can we do this better. And so what we did, and I was hoping that Gareth would talk about it, but he didn't. So I'm going to throw the ball back to him and ask you to talk to him about it afterwards. Is we actually co-designed a straw man of what has now been called a community network initiative, an energy well-being network, an energy affordability hub, local energy initiatives, whatever it is. We need a national hub that helps make this work in the community on the regional level and is run by the community for the community with strong support from industry, government, research, and philanthropy. And I'm just going to leave you with this. This was one of the images, one of the visualization exercises that we did at one of those hui, and we created a straw person, Rangi Maria, and her disabled child, who was medically dependent, had really high energy needs. They lost their home because they couldn't afford the bills anymore. They ended up with whānau, and now a lot of conflict in the household with these increased energy bills and other needs. And this is what the system looks like for somebody like Rangi Maria if she would like to go out and get the support that is partly out there, but it is so siloed and bitsy, and all of these bombs you see there are actual roadblocks that are in her way that she would need to overcome, that somebody in her situation who is a full-time carer focusing on a disabled child just wouldn't be able to do. And so this is what we need to focus on, how we can actually address this in this whole system kind of energy justice driven way. And so, the things that I want to ask you and that I want you to please talk about over dinner and talk with Gareth and others there, and then write me an email and come back to me is the first one is, do you support a community driven whole system approach to reducing energy hardship and increasing resilience in Aotearoa? And from a lot of the presentations I heard today is I think the answer is yes. And if it is so and you have any funding, go and talk to Gareth. And then the second one, which is of interest to me for future research potentially, is if you agree that we should prioritize those who need help the most. Because my theory, my hypothesis is that if we manage to change the system so it helps those that are the hardest to reach, the most hidden, and in living in the most hardship, then the system will work better for everyone else as well. And so, yeah, that's me. Ngā mihi, enjoyed dinner and drinks, and yeah, I'm jealous.